My gallery director uninvited me from our exclusive collector's gala, saying I lacked the cultural sophistication for such refined company. She nearly fainted when the estate curator welcomed me as Miss Chen, the collector's daughter, and escorted everyone to view my family's private Monet collection I'd loaned to her gallery. The words still echoed in my ears as I stood frozen in Victoria Ashford's pristine white office, surrounded by priceless contemporary art that I'd personally helped authenticate. "You simply don't have the refinement we need, Sarah," she'd said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that only comes from inherited wealth married to acquired snobbery. The Thornwood Estate Gala is for individuals who truly understand the art world's nuances. Your pedestrian background would be jarring to our distinguished guests. I'd maintained my professional composure, nodded politely, and walked out of her office with my head high. But inside, something had shifted. For 4 years, I'd suppressed my family name, my connections, my entire background. I'd taken the assistant curator position at Ashford Gallery using my middle name Sarah Chen instead of Sarah Maylin Chen Thornwood. I'd wanted to earn my place in the art world through knowledge and merit, not through my family's legendary collection or my mother's reputation as one of the foremost Asian art historians in the world. And where had that gotten me? Excluded. Dismissed. Deemed culturally unsophisticated by a woman who couldn't tell a genuine Qing dynasty vase from a reproduction if her Hermès Birkin depended on it. Let me back up. 4 years ago, I just completed my dual master's degrees in art history and museum studies from Columbia. My thesis on the intersection of traditional Chinese ink painting and Western Impressionism had been published in 3 academic journals. I spoke fluent Mandarin, French, and Italian. I'd spent summers interning at the Louvre, the Met, and the National Palace Museum in Taipei. By all objective measures, I was more than qualified for a curatorial position. But I knew the art world. I knew how it worked. Every opportunity would come with whispers of nepotism. Oh, Sarah Chen Thornwood. Of course she got that position. Her mother's collection could fund a small museum. Her family's estate has a Monet water lily series. Did you know they have the largest private collection of Song Dynasty ceramics outside of China? So I'd become Sarah Chen. I'd rented a modest apartment in Brooklyn instead of living at the family's Upper East Side townhouse. I'd taken the subway to work. I'd lived on my curator's salary instead of my trust fund. For 4 years, I'd proven myself through 12-hour days, meticulous research, and a genuine passion for bringing art to people who deserve to see it. I'd organized the gallery's most successful exhibition on emerging Asian American artists. I'd personally authenticated a disputed Sargent that Victoria had been ready to reject, which later sold for $3.2 million. I'd built relationships with collectors, artists, and donors through genuine expertise and enthusiasm, not family connections. And still, Victoria treated me like I was some kind of imposter who'd stumbled into the art world by accident. The breaking point had come that Tuesday morning during our weekly staff meeting. Victoria had been in rare form, already irritated because the espresso machine in her office was being serviced. She'd clicked through her presentation slides with sharp, impatient gestures, her Cartier bracelets jangling. "As you all know," she announced to the assembled staff of 12, "the Thornwood Estate Collectors Gala is this Saturday evening. This event is the pinnacle of our spring calendar. The Thornwood Collection is one of the most prestigious private holdings in the world, and we are extraordinarily privileged that they've agreed to host our top patrons." I'd sat quietly in my usual seat, taking notes. The Thornwood Estate. My family's property. The 18th-century mansion that my great-great-grandfather had purchased, where my mother had built one of the world's finest private collections over 40 years. The gardens where I'd played as a child, running between sculptures by Giacometti and Brancusi. Attendance is limited to our most significant donors and the senior curatorial staff, Victoria continued. "Marcus, you'll be presenting on the new acquisition strategy. Jennifer, you'll be discussing the fall exhibition calendar, and I'll be giving a special presentation on our partnership with the Thornwood family." She clicked to the next slide, a photo of the estate's famous sculpture garden at sunset. I'd taken that exact photo when I was 16, during a summer party. I remembered the evening perfectly, the golden light filtering through the oak trees, the way the bronze figures seemed to come alive in the shadows. "The guest list is extremely carefully curated," Victoria said, emphasizing each word as though we might not understand the gravity. "This is not an event for junior staff. The caliber of conversation requires a certain level of cultural sophistication and art historical knowledge. I'd expected my name to appear on the list of attendees. I'd been working on a research project about the Thornwood Collection's Impressionist paintings for months. I knew every brushstroke of those Monets, every provenance detail of the Cézannes. More importantly, I'd been the one to facilitate the connection between Ashford Gallery and the estate in the first place, though Victoria didn't know that. The attendee list flashed on the screen. I scanned it once. Twice. My name wasn't there. Marcus was listed. He'd been at the gallery for 18 months and still thought Baroque and Rococo were the same thing. Jennifer was there. She was competent, but her expertise was in contemporary photography, not the old masters and impressionist works that comprised the Thornwood Collection's crown jewels. Even Dylan, the new acquisition specialist who'd been hired 3 months ago specifically because his father was on the board of trustees, was on the list, but not Sarah Chen. I'd felt the familiar flush of heat rising up my neck. Around the table, I caught a few sympathetic glances from colleagues. Maya, the registrar, looked uncomfortable. Tom, the conservator, was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. If there are no questions, Victoria had concluded briskly, those attending should collect their information packets from my assistant. Business formal attire. 7 p.m. sharp. The Thornwood family does not tolerate lateness. The meeting had adjourned. I'd waited, letting everyone else file out, before approaching Victoria's office. Professional. Calm. I'd practiced this conversation in my head. Victoria, do you have a moment? She'd looked up from her phone, barely concealing her irritation at being interrupted. Sarah. Make it quick. I have a call with Sotheby's in 5 minutes. I noticed I wasn't on the list for the Thornwood Gala, I'd said evenly. Given my research on their Impressionist collection and my work on the Asian art exhibition, I thought I might be able to contribute valuable context for the donors. Victoria had actually laughed. A short, sharp sound that felt like a slap. Sarah, this is a highly exclusive event. The guests will be discussing 6-figure acquisitions, museum-quality provenance, the nuances of collecting at the highest level. They expect to interact with curators who move in those circles, who understand that world. She'd paused, her eyes flicking over my off-the-rack blazer and simple pearl earrings. You're very dedicated, and your research is adequate. But you simply don't have the background for this kind of gathering. I have 2 master's degrees, I'd said, keeping my voice level. My thesis was on Impressionist Asian art connections. I've published peer-reviewed research on this exact collection. Academic credentials are fine for the classroom, Victoria had replied with false patience. But this requires something more. Cultural sophistication. The ability to discuss a Monet with someone who owns one, not just someone who's studied one. An understanding of what it means to live with great art, not just look at it on weekends. She'd leaned back in her designer chair, fingers steepled. These collectors can spot an outsider immediately. Your presence would honestly be uncomfortable for everyone involved. An outsider, I'd repeated slowly. You know what I mean. You're from a different background. Your parents are what? Academics? Professors? Very respectable, I'm sure. But this is a different stratum entirely. These are people whose grandparents collected alongside Isabella Stewart Gardner. Your well-meaning enthusiasm would just highlight the gap. I'd stood there, absorbing every word like poison. The irony was almost physically painful. My mother had literally written the definitive academic text on Song Dynasty ceramics. My father's family had been collecting art in China for 7 generations before emigrating. The different background Victoria was sneering at included more cultural sophistication than she'd ever possess. I understand, I'd said finally. Thank you for your time. I knew you'd be professional about this. Victoria had smiled, already turning back to her phone. This is just how the art world works, Sarah. Perhaps someday, if you continue to develop your knowledge and connections, you'll be ready for this level. I'd walked back to my small office, really just a converted storage room with a desk and a window overlooking an air shaft, and closed the door. For a long moment, I just stood there, shaking. Then I'd pulled out my personal phone and texted my mother. The gala on Saturday. Are you still planning to attend? Her response came immediately. Of course, darling. Why? Has something changed? I'd stared at the message for a full minute before responding. For 4 years, I'd asked my family to stay in the background. No visits to the gallery, no acknowledgement of our connection. They'd respected my wishes, though I knew it hurt them. My mother had been especially supportive, understanding my need to forge my own path. But this wasn't about forging my own path anymore. This was about being systematically dismissed despite demonstrably superior qualifications. This was about Victoria Ashford's casual cruelty and unchecked assumptions. I think it's time for a small revelation. I typed. Are you up for some fun? My mother's response had included 3 champagne emojis and a note. I've been waiting for you to say that for 4 years. Let me call Margaret and arrange a few things. Margaret Liu, the Thornwood Estates curator. She'd known me since I was 8 years old, had mentored me through my undergraduate years, and had been quietly feeding me research access to the collection while respecting my desire for professional anonymity. That evening, I'd sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop and a glass of wine, a 2015 Chateau Margaux from my father's cellar, one of the few luxuries I allowed myself, and made meticulous notes. Not for revenge. I didn't want petty revenge. I wanted something more elegant. I wanted Victoria to understand exactly what she'd dismissed. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her own condescension reflected back at her. The next 3 days at work had been surreal. Victoria was in high gear, micromanaging every detail of the gala. She'd had 5 separate meetings about the presentation she'd be giving, practicing her remarks about our partnership with the prestigious Thornwood family as though she'd cultivated the relationship personally. The irony would have been hilarious if it weren't so infuriating. She'd summoned me on Thursday afternoon to review condition reports on some pieces in our current exhibition. As I'd walked into her office, she was on the phone, her voice syrupy with false warmth. Yes, Mrs. Chen Thornwood, we are so looking forward to Saturday evening. The Monet Water Lily series is extraordinary. Yes, my staff has prepared extensively. Of course, we understand the importance of proper protocol when displaying such masterpieces. I'd frozen in the doorway. Victoria was talking to my mother. We are deeply honored by your trust in Ashford Gallery. Yes, I'll be personally overseeing every detail. Thank you so much. See you Saturday. She'd hung up and noticed me standing there. Sarah, the condition reports. I'd handed them over, keeping my face carefully neutral while my mind raced. My mother hadn't mentioned she'd be speaking with Victoria. What was she planning? Mrs. Chen Thornwood is quite particular, Victoria had said, scanning the documents. A brilliant collector with exacting standards. This gala is a tremendous opportunity for the gallery. I can't afford any missteps. She'd looked up at me pointedly. Which is why I need you to handle the gallery on Saturday evening. Someone needs to be here for security. And frankly, your skills are better utilized in operational support than client interaction. So I'd be stuck at the gallery while everyone else attended the event at my family's home. The insult was almost impressive in its audacity. Of course, I'd said. Whatever the gallery needs. Friday afternoon, my mother had called. Darling, I've arranged everything with Margaret. You'll arrive at 6:30 tomorrow, an hour before the gallery staff. Wear the Valentino we bought you last year. The deep blue one. And the jade pendant grandmother left you. Mom. I'm not trying to show off. Sarah Malin, she'd said, using my full name the way she did when she meant business. You've spent 4 years hiding your light under a bushel to prove a point. You've proven it. Your work speaks for itself. But this woman needs to learn that expertise and refinement aren't determined by who she deems worthy. They're earned through knowledge, respect, and genuine passion for art. You have all 3. She has none. What exactly did you arrange with Margaret? You'll see. Trust me. And Sarah? Your father and I are very proud of you. These 4 years of integrity and hard work, regardless of recognition, that's who you are. But it's time for you to stop apologizing for who you raised you to be. Saturday morning, I'd woken up early, my stomach tight with anticipation. I'd spent the morning reviewing my notes on the collection, though I could have recited every provenance detail from memory. These weren't just paintings in a gallery to me. They were old friends. The Monet Water Lily triptych that hung in the East Gallery had been my favorite as a teenager. I'd spent hours studying the way the light shifted across the painted water, the way Monet had captured not just what he saw, but how he felt. At noon, Victoria had texted the group chat, final reminder, event begins at 7 p.m. sharp, business formal, black car service picking up senior staff at 6:15 p.m. Sarah, confirm you have the gallery security codes and emergency contacts. I'd confirmed I had everything, then added, "Have a wonderful evening." At 4 p.m., I'd started getting ready. The Valentino gown was exquisite deep sapphire blue silk that moved like water, elegant without being ostentatious. I'd pulled my hair into a low chignon, the way my grandmother had taught me. The jade pendant was a family heirloom, a Ming Dynasty piece that belonged in a museum. My grandmother had insisted I have it. "Jade chooses its wearer," she'd always said. "This piece has waited generations for you." I'd looked at myself in the mirror. This was who I was. Sarah Malin Chen Thornwood. Art historian. Curator. Daughter of collectors. Granddaughter of scholars. I'd spent 4 years trying to separate those identities. Maybe it was time to embrace all of them. At 6:25, my driver James, who'd been with my family for 20 years, pulled up to the Thornwood Estate's private entrance. The main gates wouldn't open until 6:45 for the arriving guests. I'd walked through the gardens I'd known all my life, past the Rodin sculptures and the reflecting pool, toward the main house. Margaret was waiting at the conservatory entrance, her face bright with mischief. "Sarah. Oh, darling. Look at you." Your mother is beside herself with excitement. She's in the main gallery, pretending to supervise the caterers while actually just counting the minutes until the Ashford contingent arrives. "Margaret, please tell me this isn't going to be cruel. I don't want to humiliate Victoria. I just want her to understand. That expertise comes from knowledge and passion, not from assumptions about background." Margaret squeezed my hand. "Sarah, what you've accomplished these 4 years has been extraordinary. You've proven yourself 10 times over. Tonight is just about removing a blindfold from someone who desperately needs to see clearly." At 6:55, the first guests began arriving. I'd positioned myself in the library, out of immediate view but able to see the entrance hall. I watched collectors I'd known my whole life arrive, air-kissing my mother, admiring the flowers, accepting champagne from the circulating servers. At 7:03, the Ashford Gallery contingent arrived. Victoria was resplendent in head-to-toe Chanel, her highlighted hair perfect, her smile radiant as she entered my family's home as though she owned it. "Mrs. Chen Thornwood," she gushed, approaching my mother with outstretched hands. "What an absolute honor. Your home is magnificent. And this collection, I am simply overwhelmed." My mother, elegant in understated Armani, smiled graciously. "Thank you, Miss Ashford. We're so pleased you could join us. Please, enjoy the champagne. We'll begin the formal program in about 20 minutes." I watched Victoria work the room, introducing Marcus and Jennifer to collectors, laughing too loudly at jokes, name-dropping with desperate enthusiasm. She was in her element, or at least what she thought was her element. At 7:15, Margaret appeared at the library doorway. "Ready?" I'd taken a deep breath. "Ready." We'd walked together toward the main gallery, where about 60 guests had gathered. The room fell into a respectful hush as my mother stepped forward to make welcoming remarks. "Good evening, and welcome to Thornwood Estate. For those of you who've joined us before, welcome back. For our new guests, we hope this is the first of many visits. The Thornwood collection has been a family passion for 4 generations now. It represents not just financial investment but emotional connection to beauty, history, and human creativity across cultures." Victoria was nodding enthusiastically, her expression one of exaggerated appreciation. "Tonight," my mother continued, "we're especially pleased to host members of Ashford Gallery, with whom we've been exploring a partnership. Miss Ashford has expressed interest in potentially displaying some pieces from our collection in future exhibitions." This was news to me, and apparently news to several people in the room who knew how rarely the Thornwood collection traveled. However, my mother said, her voice taking on a slightly different tone, "Before we discuss such partnerships, I believe proper introductions are in order. You see, my daughter has been working in the art world for 4 years now, and I'm told she's made quite an impression through her knowledge and dedication." I'd felt my pulse quicken. This was it. "Sarah, darling, would you join me?" I'd stepped out from the library, walking across the marble floor toward my mother. I'd heard the collective intake of breath, saw heads turning, and I'd watched Victoria's face drain of color as recognition dawned. "For those who don't know," my mother said, slipping her arm through mine, "this is my daughter, Sarah Malin Chen Thornwood. She completed her dual master's degrees in art history and museum studies from Columbia 4 years ago. Her thesis on the intersection of traditional Chinese ink painting and Western Impressionism has been published in multiple academic journals. She speaks 4 languages fluently, and for the past 4 years, she's been working as an assistant curator, choosing to establish her expertise independently before revealing her family connections. The silence was absolute. Victoria looked like she might actually collapse. Sarah has been working at Ashford Gallery, my mother continued pleasantly, under her middle name, Chen. Miss Ashford. I believe you know her as Sarah Chen? Victoria's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Around us, several guests who were art world insiders had started putting pieces together, their expressions shifting from surprise to understanding to, in a few cases, barely suppressed amusement. I had no idea. Victoria stammered. Of course you didn't, my mother said, her voice kind but firm. Sarah specifically requested anonymity so she could prove herself on merit, which, from what I understand, she's done quite admirably. The Asian American Artists Exhibition, that was Sarah's concept and execution. The Sargent authentication that saved your gallery from a significant error? Sarah's expertise, the connections that led to this potential partnership between Ashford Gallery and our collection, those were cultivated by Sarah, though she asked me not to mention it. Margaret had stepped forward, holding a leather portfolio. Perhaps, Miss Ashford, you'd like to see some of Sarah's research on the Thornwood Impressionist collection? The work you suggested she wasn't quite ready to present. I'd finally found my voice. Victoria, I want to be clear. I'm not sharing this to embarrass you or to leverage my family connections unfairly. I've spent 4 years working to earn my place in the art world through expertise, not nepotism. But your comments about my background, my sophistication, my ability to understand collectors, those weren't based on my actual qualifications. They were based on assumptions. Victoria had gone from pale to flushed. Sarah, I apologize. I had no idea you were. That your family. I mean, clearly you have extensive knowledge of art, I'd finished. Which I had before you knew who my family was, and which I'll have regardless of who they are. That's the point, Victoria. Cultural sophistication isn't about who your grandparents collected alongside. It's about knowledge, passion, respect for history, and genuine curiosity about human creativity across all cultures. One of the collectors, Elizabeth Hartwell, whom I'd known since childhood, spoke up. Sarah, your mother showed me your research on the Japanese influence in the Monet Water Lily series last month. It was brilliant. I'd be honored if you'd present that tonight instead of. She glanced at Victoria. Whatever was originally planned. Around the room, several other collectors nodded agreement. I'd looked at my mother, who smiled encouragingly. I'd be happy to, I'd said. If that's acceptable to everyone. The presentation had gone beautifully. I'd spoken about the Monet triptych not just as an art historian, but as someone who'd grown up with these paintings, who'd watched light move across them through different seasons, who understood them as both scholarly artifacts and living works of beauty. The collectors had asked sophisticated questions. I'd answered them thoroughly, occasionally sharing personal anecdotes about discovering certain details as a child or learning about provenance from Margaret. Victoria had stood at the back of the room, looking smaller and smaller as the evening progressed. Afterward, as guests mingled in the sculpture garden, Elizabeth had approached me with a proposition. Sarah, the Hartwell Foundation is opening a new contemporary art museum in Los Angeles. We're looking for a chief curator. Someone with academic credentials, curatorial experience, and a genuine vision for making art accessible while maintaining scholarly rigor. Would you be interested in discussing it? Before I could answer, 2 other collectors had similar offers: board positions, consulting opportunities, exhibition partnerships. I'd found Victoria near the reflecting pool, staring at her champagne glass. May I join you? She'd nodded, not meeting my eyes. Victoria, I want you to understand something. I'm not angry about being excluded from tonight. Well, I am, but that's not the point. What bothers me is that you made assumptions about my capabilities based on superficial factors: my age, my clothing, your perception of my background. You didn't assess my actual work, my knowledge, my qualifications. You assessed what you thought I represented. You're right, she'd said quietly. I was wrong. Completely wrong. And I'm sorry. I accept your apology. And I want to ask you something. How many other talented curators, researchers, or art historians have you dismissed based on similar assumptions? How much brilliance have you overlooked because people didn't fit your mental image of what an art world insider should look like? She'd been quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Too many, probably. The art world is changing, I'd said. It has to change. Museums and galleries need curators who understand diverse artistic traditions, who can build bridges between cultures, who bring fresh perspectives. That requires opening doors to people from all backgrounds, not just those who already move in collecting circles. What are you going to do? She'd asked. About Ashford Gallery. I'd considered. I'm going to accept Elizabeth Hartwell's offer to discuss the Los Angeles position. Not because I'm angry, but because it's an extraordinary opportunity to build something new. But I'd like to suggest something for Ashford Gallery. She'd finally looked at me. What? Create a junior curator fellowship. A paid position for recent graduates from diverse backgrounds. No connections required, just expertise and passion. I'll help design the program and review applications. Let's find the next generation of art historians who deserve opportunities based on their knowledge, not their family names. Victoria had blinked rapidly, and I'd realized she was fighting tears. I would like that very much. And Sarah, for what it's worth, you're the best curator I've ever worked with. I was too blind and too arrogant to see it. 3 months later, I'd started my position as chief curator at the Hartwell Contemporary Art Museum. The announcement had made art world news. Chen Thornwood brings fresh vision to West Coast institution. Articles mentioned my family background, yes, but they focused more on my academic credentials, my innovative approaches to exhibition design, and my commitment to showcasing diverse artistic voices. Victoria had indeed created the fellowship program. Maya, the registrar who'd given me sympathetic looks during that awful meeting, was now the program coordinator. The first fellow was a brilliant young curator from Detroit who specialized in African American contemporary artists. He'd done his master's at a state school, worked 3 jobs to pay for it, and had a mind that made connections I'd never considered. At the Ashford Gallery opening for his first curated exhibition, Victoria had pulled me aside. Thank you, she'd said simply, for handling everything with such grace. And for this idea. David is extraordinary. I almost didn't interview him because his resume didn't have the right pedigree. I caught myself making the same mistake again, and then I heard your voice in my head. I'd smiled. That's not my voice. It's the voice of what the art world should be. You're just finally listening. My mother had attended that opening too, along with my father and several Thornwood Collection trustees. Watching them admire David's innovative exhibition design, I'd felt something settle into place. I'd proven I could succeed on merit. I'd also learned that honoring my family and my heritage wasn't incompatible with professional integrity. The two could coexist, strengthen each other even. 4 years of hiding had taught me I was capable. But owning all of who I was, the scholarship, the passion, the family legacy, the cultural background, that was its own kind of power. As I told the journalist who interviewed me for the Los Angeles Times profile, success isn't about denying where you come from or who supported you. It's about honoring those foundations while building something uniquely yours through knowledge, integrity, and genuine love for your work. The art world needs curators who bring both expertise and empathy, who understand that great art speaks across all boundaries, and who recognize brilliance regardless of its packaging. The article had run with a photo of me standing in the Hartwell Museum's atrium, with a quote in large text: "Cultural sophistication is earned through curiosity and knowledge, not inherited through zip codes." Victoria had texted me when it published, "I'm framing that quote for my office, as a reminder." I'd responded, "Frame it for the fellowship office instead. Let it remind the next generation that they belong in this world just as much as anyone else." Because at the end of the day, that was the real lesson. Not revenge, not proving someone wrong, but opening doors that should never have been closed in the first place, and trusting that talent and passion would walk through them. The art world was changing, and I was proud to be part of that change, not because of my family name, but because of what I'd learned, what I'd proven, and what I believed about who deserved a seat at the table. Everyone who brought knowledge, respect, and genuine love for art, no exceptions,